What would drive a man to abandon his family and spend 50 years surrounding himself with severed doll heads? Local legend claims these plastic figures are not just toys. They are vessels for the souls of the departed. On a desolate island hidden inside the canals of Xochimilco, Don Julián Santana Barrera believed a drowned girl's spirit was watching him from the water. So he hung one doll from a tree, then another, then thousands. Tonight we uncover why the spirits stayed, and the chilling price one man paid for trying to silence them. Because this is not just the story of a haunted island. It is the story of a man who thought he was protecting himself from a ghost, until the island finally took him too. Deep inside the canals of Xochimilco, south of Mexico City, there is a place that looks like it was never meant to be found. The water is dark, the trees are twisted, the air feels heavy, and hanging from almost every branch are dolls, old dolls, broken dolls, dolls without eyes, dolls without arms, dolls with cracked faces, missing hair, and mouths frozen open like they are trying to scream. Some hang by their necks, some sit silently on fences, some stare from the trees, and when the wind moves through the island, their plastic bodies swing gently in the air. To a tourist, it looks like a nightmare. To Don Julián Santana Barrera, it was protection. He did not see the dolls as decorations. He saw them as offerings, as guardians, as something standing between him and the spirit he believed was haunting the island. But before the dolls came, there was only the water and the girl. According to local legend, Don Julián once found the body of a young girl floating in the canal near his island. Some versions say he tried to save her but failed. Others say he discovered her after it was already too late. But all versions agree on one thing. After that day, Don Julián was never the same. He believed the girl's spirit had not left the island. He believed she was still there, still trapped, still watching him from the water. Then, not long after the drowning, something floated toward him. A doll, old, dirty, drifting slowly through the canal. Don Julián believed it belonged to the dead girl. Maybe it was her toy. Maybe it was a sign. Maybe it was a warning. So he took the doll from the water and hung it from a tree, not because it looked creepy, not because he wanted attention, but because he believed it would calm her spirit. One doll for one dead girl. That should have been enough. But according to the legend, the island did not become peaceful. It became louder. At first, Don Julián thought the doll would make the spirit leave him alone. But then he began hearing things. Whispers in the trees, small footsteps outside his cabin, a child crying near the water. Sometimes, late at night, he would look toward the canal and feel like something was standing just beyond the darkness, watching, waiting, wanting more. The first doll had not ended the haunting. It had only opened the door. So Don Julián brought another doll, then another, then another. He searched through trash. He collected broken toys. He traded vegetables and produced for old dolls. Any doll he could find, he brought back to the island. He hung them from trees, nailed them to walls, tied them to fences, placed them near the cabin. Over time, the island became covered with them. Hundreds, then thousands. Every doll was another offering, another attempt to calm the girl, another attempt to calm the girl, another silent prayer to whatever was watching him from the canal. Now imagine living there alone, no city noise, no family, no real neighbors, just dark water, trees, and thousands of doll eyes staring at you from every direction. And every night, when the wind moved, they moved too. People who visited the island said the dolls felt wrong, not just old, not just dirty, wrong. Their heads turned in strange directions. Their empty eye sockets seemed to follow visitors. Their cracked faces looked almost alive in the shadows. Some visitors claimed they heard whispering, soft voices, like children speaking from the trees. Others claimed the dolls moved their arms, or opened their eyes, or changed positions when no one was looking. Of course, skeptics had explanations: wind, animals, fear, the power of suggestion. When you walk through an island full of rotting dolls, your mind starts creating things. But Don Julián believed something else. He believed the dolls were not empty. He believed they were inhabited. He believed the spirits of the dead were using them as vessels, and that belief slowly consumed him. The island was no longer a home. It was a shrine, a warning, a place where grief had turned into obsession. And the more dolls he added, the more the island seemed to demand. Years passed, then decades. Don Julián became known as the strange man who lived with dolls. People heard stories about him. Some thought he was crazy. Some thought he was cursed. Some thought he had discovered something real out there in the canals. But he kept living on the island, alone with the dolls, alone with the story of the girl, alone with the voice he believed was calling to him. Think about what 50 years means. 50 years of waking up under doll faces. 50 years of walking past broken plastic bodies hanging from trees. 50 years of hearing the canal at night and wondering if the girl was still there, waiting. And the longer he stayed, the harder it became to tell whether Don Julián was protecting himself from the island, or whether the island had already trapped him. Because sometimes, a haunted place does not lock the doors. It simply gives you a reason to stay. As the stories spread, people began visiting the island. Some came out of curiosity. Some came to laugh. Some came to test their courage. But many left unsettled. The island did not feel like a normal tourist spot. It felt watched. Everywhere you looked, there were faces. Above you, behind you, in the trees, beside the water. Some dolls were missing eyes, but somehow still seemed to stare. Some had blackened faces from age. Some had mouths open just wide enough to look like they were whispering. Visitors began leaving their own dolls behind, not only as gifts, but as offerings. Because once you stand on that island, surrounded by thousands of broken dolls, something strange happens. You start to understand Don Julián. You start to think, maybe one more doll would not hurt. Maybe it is better not to leave empty-handed. Maybe it is better to give the island what it wants. That is how the collection grew. Not just from one man's fear, but from everyone who felt the island watching them. Don Julián's connection to the drowned girl became stronger as he grew older. He reportedly believed she still spoke to him, that she called from the canal, that she wanted him. Some versions of the story say he heard voices from the water. Others say he believed spirits were gathering around the island. The dolls were meant to protect him, but they also became proof of his fear. Because if the spirit was gone, why keep adding more? If the island was safe, why surround yourself with thousands of dead-eyed figures? If the dolls were working, why did the fear never end? This is the part of the story that feels the most disturbing. Because maybe the dolls were not protecting Don Julián. Maybe they were keeping him company. Maybe he no longer knew how to live without them. Maybe every doll he hung from a tree made the ghost feel more real. And maybe, after 50 years, the island had become less like a sanctuary, and more like a trap built from his own mind. But then came the ending, the part of the legend that made people believe the island had finally claimed him. In 2001, Don Julián died. But it was not just his death that made the story terrifying. It was where he was found. According to the legend, Don Julián was discovered drowned in the canal, in the same area where he believed the little girl had died, the same water, the same darkness, the same place where the story had begun. For believers, this was not coincidence. They say the girl finally took him. They say the island had waited for decades. They say the dolls were never enough. One offering became thousands. Thousands became a lifetime. And in the end, the spirit still wanted the man who had been listening to her for 50 years. Skeptics say it was a tragic accident. An old man near dangerous water. A lonely life ending in the same place where his obsession began. But stories like this do not survive because they are easy to explain. They survive because the explanation never feels complete. Because when a man spends half a century feeding a ghost with dolls, and then dies in the water where that ghost was born, people do not simply call it an accident. They call it a warning. Today, the dolls still hang on the island. Their skin has cracked. Their clothes have rotted. Their eyes have faded. But they are still there, watching the boats, watching the trees, watching the water. Some visitors say they still hear whispers. Some say the dolls move when no one is looking. Some say cameras stop working. Some say they feel a child's presence near the canal. And some say the island feels less like a place of death and more like a place that is waiting for something. Maybe Don Julián was wrong. Maybe there was never a ghost. Maybe the island is only frightening because humans gave it meaning. But maybe he was right. Maybe something did stay behind. Maybe the girl's spirit never left the water. Maybe every doll became another body for something unseen. Maybe the reason visitors feel watched is simple. They are being watched, not by one ghost, but by thousands of eyes Don Julián placed there himself. So what really happened on the island of dolls? Was Don Julián a grieving man haunted by a dead child? Was he a lonely hermit consumed by guilt and obsession? Was the island truly filled with spirits? Or did one terrifying belief grow so large that it turned an ordinary place into a shrine of nightmares? No one can prove what Don Julián heard at night. No one can prove what he saw in the canal. No one can prove whether the dolls moved, whispered, or watched. But one thing is certain. He believed. He believed enough to leave his old life behind. He believed enough to spend decades collecting dolls. He believed enough to turn an island into a warning. And maybe belief is what makes a haunting powerful. Because once enough people believe a place is cursed, they enter it differently. They listen harder. They look longer. They feel the air change. And sometimes, when the wind moves through the trees and thousands of plastic eyes turn in the dark, even skeptics stop laughing. The Island of Dolls is more than a strange tourist attraction. It is a story about grief, fear, obsession, and the terrifying possibility that some spirits do not want to leave. Don Julián Santana Barrera hung one doll for a drowned girl, then another, then thousands. For 50 years, he tried to silence whatever he believed was haunting him. But in the end, he died in the same water where the legend began. Maybe the dolls protected him. Maybe they cursed him. Maybe they were only broken toys. Or maybe they were exactly what the legend says they are. Vessels. Empty bodies waiting for something to enter. So if you ever travel through the canals of Xochimilco and see a doll hanging from a tree, do not stare too long. Do not touch it. And whatever you do, do not take one home. Because some dolls are not abandoned. Some dolls are placed there for a reason. And some spirits only stay quiet when they are given a body to hide in.